We're back. It's Tuesday with what we're calling the Caleb Show. And I am still not engaging anything any of you guys say about what Dave's doing this week because he's on vacation. But it is what it is. Thank you guys for joining us. It's Caleb Calhoun and Caleb Jarreau here hosting for Off the Hook. Jarreau, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Caleb. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. So, have you ever been too hammered to do a show?
I'm not, no.
Okay. Well, we're both sober today, guys. Luckily, we're going to dive in on fun stuff. We got a lot to get into. We got Jarreau for the first segment, and then after the first segment, after the first segment of the show, he's going to have to balance. He's got a lot of things to handle, so it'll just be me and you guys after that. But hey, we can still have a lot of fun no matter what. So, what are we going to talk about today? We got a little bit of recruiting news. We got a baseball transfer portal news out. That's kind of intriguing. And got some Tennessee-Georgia comparisons going on and the basketball SEC schedule. So a lot to get to. We're actually going to go ahead and dive right in with the news surrounding recruiting. Because recently, just yesterday actually, ESPN made a pretty bold prediction. Tom Van Haren, ESPN staff writer, he made a commitment prediction for 6 of the top 2024 recruits, and one of them on there was Braylon Staley out of South Carolina. He predicted that Staley would go to Tennessee. Staley's a 4-star, 6 feet, roughly 180. And by the way, ESPN alone isn't ranking him a 4-star. 247 Sports Rivals, they all have him as that too. So because ESPN, we agree, is probably the worst at ranking, but at the same time, ESPN is the least biased. They have no agenda when they do it in their defense. But he has Braylon Staley going to Tennessee. But we kind of wanted to dive in on this because we find it intriguing because, as Jarreau pointed out recently, Tennessee's heavily targeting Mike Matthews, who is 6'2", 180 and is a 5-star and is much more highly touted and seems much more likely to land at Tennessee. So, Jarreau, I ask you this simply. Is there room for Tennessee to land both in the recruiting class?
You know, it's an interesting topic because Tennessee was also big on Ryan Wingo, and he's kind of started to lean more towards, your Georgias or your Alabamas. So it seems like they're all in on Mike Matthews and that they're leading for Mike Matthews right now at the wide receiver spot. So for Braylon Staley, I think it's going to come down to North Carolina and Tennessee. He officially visited Tennessee on June 16th. So not this past weekend, but the weekend before. And then he was in his he was at North Carolina last weekend for an official visit. And it's interesting, too, with him because 247 Sports has 3 crystal balls for Braylon Staley to go to Clemson. But the Tigers don't seem to be one of his top schools right now. It really does seem to be North Carolina and Tennessee. So you brought up an interesting point as well. If you take Braylon Staley and Mike Matthews, could Staley maybe specialize in more of a slot role? He's 6 foot, 180 pounds. You have to assume he's more of a fast guy compared to Mike Matthews' size and speed you could use on the outside. Also, Tennessee, like we saw last year, struggled with depth at the wide receiver spot. You had a lot of injuries. So Braylon Staley would probably be able to find a role. I just wonder if he's kind of mulling over if he wants to go to North Carolina, where playing time is probably a lot more prevalent than it would be if he went to Tennessee.
Yes, but if you can get on the field at Tennessee, you're going to get turned into an NFL receiver. So, I mean, it's one of those where you take one, you take the other, you just kind of try to figure out what's going on with that. But yeah, I would assume that, okay, so right now Tennessee in their slot role at receiver, they have obviously Squirrel White, Dante Thornton, but there is room for a long-term future prospect at the position, and so you could theoretically see room for Braylon Staley. But I'm with you. Just because he's 6 feet doesn't mean that he's like a speed guy. We are just assuming that, so we don't know for sure. Maybe the rating is based on an assumption that he'll grow into what he's grow into a 6'2", 6'3" guy. We don't know. But so my question for you is, if you are Josh Heupel, do you consider maybe not taking Braylon Staley or maybe being a little distant because you're worried that if you land him, you won't land Mike Matthews?
So Staley is committing this Friday, and Matthews is likely going to be a end of July, August commitment right before his senior year of high school. So that is something that they're probably thinking about. I don't think, and we see Tennessee do this a lot right now in their recruiting as well. Tennessee doesn't host as many guys on official visits as Alabama and Georgia does, but that's not because the prospects are turning down official visits. It's because they're not offering out as many official visits as you would sort of expect. So I'm of the mind that you can't put all your eggs in one basket, because what if Mike Matthews wakes up one morning and decides he doesn't want to commit to Tennessee and wants to commit to, somewhere else that's recruiting him. So that worries me if they do put all their eggs in the Matthews basket and then you don't land Matthews, because now you're kind of left high and dry on all of your receiver targets, because Wingo seems to sort of be a long shot at this point, sort of for Tennessee. They seem to be falling behind in his recruitment as well. And to go off of the slot thing, he ran 100-meter dash times of – Braylon Staley ran 100-meter dash times of 11.24 and 11.51. So the speed is there. I don't know if I'd say it's necessarily run you off the field speed that you want, that Josh Heupel wants at that slot position, like you think of with Squirrel White. But I don't know. This is a very interesting one, and I assume if ESPN knows enough to put him in their list of prospects, because ESPN's recruiting usually isn't as up to par with, obviously the recruiting websites, then he seems to be a hard lean at Tennessee. I just don't know how that would work if Tennessee ends up taking multiple wide receivers.
Yeah, I agree. It seems, and also if you're Tennessee, and this is where recruiting rankings become a lot very, very sketchy, put it that way, which is that a lot of times you'll see recruiting rankings where programs loaded up on positions they didn't need. So if Tennessee gets a top 5 class because they have 6 4-star wide receivers or higher in the class, well, that's not going to mean that much, because 3 of them are going to transfer and not really play. I will say that it's funny you bring up Ryan Wingo. I actually thought he would have been leaning Tennessee more, but particularly being from Missouri, which is, as we know, Josh Heupel developed a reputation as an offensive coach when he was coaching at Missouri, and Ryan Wingo's from St. Louis. But at least according to some sources I'm seeing, he's leaning Georgia, isn't he?
That's what it seems to be, yeah, for him. He seems to be trending more towards Georgia. And then it's kind of funny you bring that up, because Mike Matthews, the prospect from Georgia, is leaning towards Tennessee right now. So it really was – Tennessee was heavy on Ryan Wingo, and then Georgia kind of started taking the lead. And then Mike Matthews came onto the scene a little bit later, but him and Tennessee staff has really gelled in their little bit of time. And then obviously Mike Matthews took his official visit and really liked it. So I would say right now Matthews would be a Tennessee lean, and like you said, Wingo is probably more towards Georgia.
Yeah, I would think the same thing. Good morning, Travis. Travis is bringing up a story on Florida baseball coach Kevin O'Sullivan. Travis, yes, I'm aware of that story. It's a couple of years old. It's going to be a little bit difficult for me to just try to. I'm not going to squeeze that in right now. Put it that way. It's a little bit disturbing. We'll just stick with that. We'll get to baseball in a minute, but kind of rounding out the recruiting rankings for this and where things are going. If you are a receiver, Jarreau, now would you take, if you're a 4-star fringe 5-star, if you're Braylon Staley, would you take a chance at Tennessee where you may not play just because the system, the reward is so great if you become a starter in that system?
With the transfer portal the way it is today, I would, yeah. Just because Braylon Staley and also Tennessee doesn't have a receiver yet in the class. It's just they're in with so many receivers right now and have so many receivers on campus that picking up multiple in this class could cause issues for guys not seeing the field. But like we've said before, if Braylon Staley does take over that slot role, he could be, Jalen Hyatt levels of NFL scouts and making a jump in college. And if he doesn't see the field the way college football is today, he can transfer in 1 or 2 years with no penalties and start over somewhere else at a different school. So the transfer portal really does change everything, because we're having this whole conversation when he could be thinking about he could always decommit in a month too if Mike Matthews commits to Tennessee, or he could get to campus for 1 or 2 years, realize he's not going to see the field and transfer to somewhere else and play almost instantly. So it really is a unique situation, especially with the way college football is today.
Yeah, I would venture to say the same thing. This is why I think Jake Merklinger committed. I think Jake Merklinger took a shot, wanting to play in Heupel's offense. he might not win the job over Nico, but if he doesn't, so what? He can go transfer and play somewhere else, and he doesn't really lose a year of eligibility because he could just take a red shirt if he wanted to. So, I mean, I agree. I don't think it's a big deal at all. Moving on, we're going to talk a little bit of Tennessee baseball because we had some breaking news this morning. Not Florida baseball, Kevin O'Sullivan drama. That's crazy. But last night was the end of the College World Series. And then this morning, Chase Burns entered the transfer portal. We talked about it yesterday, but it wasn't official. It's official now, but Jarreau, it does seem inevitable. My question is, do you think it's smart for Chase Burns to do this?
Like you said, I think it was inevitable. I don't think anybody was really doubting if Chase Burns is going to stay around or go in the transfer portal. But from my standpoint, I don't really see the point of leaving at this point. He was disgruntled about moving to the bullpen, and I understand that. But he was successful out of the bullpen. Before he moved to a reliever role for Tony Vitello in Tennessee, his ERA was over 11 after 4 starts. So he wasn't having success on the mound. I guess you see it a lot of times, too, in college athletes. I would call it maybe a sophomore slump that he just didn't have it at the beginning of the season. But I find it hard to believe Tony Vitello didn't talk to Chase Burns and let him know that he was probably going to be a starter next year. Because you think about it, you lose Andrew Lindsey, who turned into Tennessee's Friday night starter. Chase Dolander's going to the draft, who turned into Tennessee's Saturday starter. So you're left with Drew Beam and Chase Burns as really your 2 real starter mold type guys. And I assumed before it came out that Burns was transferring that Beam would slide into the Saturday role and Burns would be your Friday night starter like he was his freshman year again. So I'm not really sure what difference it makes if he goes to a different school, because he wasn't having success as a starter at the beginning of the season. And everywhere no matter what school he goes to, the mound's 60 foot 6 inches, and he's still throwing to, you're going to assume, SEC guys. So I don't see the logic, but I assume it was probably a decision between him and his family and what they thought was best.
Yeah, it's funny. Just yesterday, it sounds like Tony Vitello told John, or this morning maybe, told John Wilkerson on 99.1 The Sports Animal that his exact quote was, "We've kind of known that he would be gone for a while." So I guess going forward with this is, look, Tennessee's going to be fine. You talked about it. We talked about it yesterday. They're recruiting really, really well in baseball right now. I think this is if one side hurts from this, I think it's Chase Burns. I think he loses more transferring from Tennessee than Tennessee loses in Chase Burns leaving. And I'm not trying to say that to take a shot at him at all. I want to know what you think.
No, I agree, because he would have been the gem of this staff next season. Like, he would have, whenever you talked about Tennessee, like the same way people talked about Tennessee this year, you talked about Chase Dolander, because that's just, he was the ace. When going into next season, it would be Tennessee baseball, and then the next sentence would be Chase Burns, just because he was going to be the gem of this staff. But like you said, I feel like Tennessee and Tony Vitello are probably going to find arms, whether it be from the transfer portal, they get freshmen in. The only difference now is there's a little more pressure for Tony Vitello to land some of those guys out of the transfer portal. We already saw they got Jacksonville State's Friday night starter, AJ Causey. He's more of a submarine type guy that I could see out of the bullpen. So next season, they're still probably looking for that second or third starter. You assume Drew Beam will stay in the starting rotation, and then you probably have an AJ Russell type who come out of the bullpen and take on a starter role. For Burns, I know he wants to be a starter, and it's not common you see closers with 4 pitches in college baseball or in Major League Baseball come out of the bullpen. So I get that. I just don't see – I know that Tennessee was trying to recruit him to stay. So I find it hard to believe that Tennessee would have told him he wasn't going to try to start next season.
Yep, Travis brings up Chase Burns coming out of the bullpen was genius. I agree. Billy Bob Cooter jumps in. Billy Bob says, unfortunately, NIL has UT as well, has hit UT as well. Kids leaving for more money. I'm gonna disagree a little bit. I don't know if NIL had a role in this. Do you, Jarreau? I think it was what you said. I think he was upset about not being moved to the bullpen, and to quote Michael Jordan, I think he took it personally and decided to bail.
Yeah, I think NIL will determine his landing destination, but I don't think NIL made a difference for him entering the portal. Because like we talked about, I think he was angry after moving to the bullpen. He wants to be a starter. He told us after the final game in Omaha that he wants to be a starter. So I assume he's going to transfer somewhere where he will be a starter. I mean, like you said, Tony Vitello told John Wilkerson this morning on the radio that it was pretty straightforward and that they known he would be gone for a while. So, I mean, it doesn't seem to be like they were offering him money or any rumors like that. It just seems to be he wants to be a starter, and he was mad when he got moved to the bullpen at Tennessee. So I think NIL might determine his landing destination, but I don't see a lot of these kids jumping into the portal because they're not making money at Tennessee.
Right. And it's kind of weird that to feel this type of way. Any sport is performance-based, and it was pretty obvious Chase Burns was better from the bullpen than he was as a starter this year. Like, there was really no question about that whatsoever. So it's a little weird that he would feel a certain way, particularly just as a sophomore when he was going to move back into the rotation as a starter probably next year, as you bring up. Now, as far as team chemistry goes, we talk about this. We talked about it with football yesterday. It does seem like there's a chemistry factor in baseball, though, even though it's the most individual team sport there is, where it's a team sport. You, more than any other sport, you need help. Less than it, one person can't do it on their own more than any other sport. But it's also the one sport where you just have to care about your job and not worry about what else everybody else is doing. So it's the most individual team sport. But chemistry does seem to be a factor when it comes to the luck and the way the ball bounces and the red hotness of the College World Series. So Chase Burns being gone with two other starters gone, as you mentioned, even if they do replace him in the transfer portal, is that going to be an issue?
I don't believe it'll be an issue with Frank Anderson coaching the team, because you do have that continuity, and you'll have Drew Beam still, who can kind of take on and be the ace of the role. And you have a ton of bullpen guys as well who will stick around. So like I said, A.J. Russell is definitely a candidate to take over a starter's role. He's somebody who gave them distance out of the bullpen and showed a lot of potential as a freshman, and he was talked highly of. So, and you want to talk about team chemistry in baseball, you can just look at Tennessee's team. I mean, it took them until halfway through the SEC slate to get their stuff together and go from 5-10 to, a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament. So with a lot of transfers this season, you did see that team chemistry kind of play a role. Chase Burns will hurt them on the field, obviously, yes, because you're losing a guy who could run triple digits and threw 4 pitches. But I don't see it being as much as a team chemistry thing, as you say, just with the continuity of the coaching staff. And you still have guys like Drew Beam who can kind of keep the system in place that produced Chase Dolander, guys like Chase Burns, stuff like that. So I do see what you're saying. I just don't. And realistically, if Chase Burns had one foot out the door after he went to the bullpen, then how much chemistry was he contributing to in the locker room?
Yeah, you're right. He probably was feeling pretty down on himself, and that might have been infecting the locker room on its own. Which it's funny because we talked about the strength of the bullpen, but Chase Burns was a strength of the bullpen. I mean, I thought that if they could have gotten to that next weekend, that would have been an advantage, but the bats really weren't showing. Jarreau, thanks a lot for doing this. I know you got a roll. We will have you back on Thursday. So, again, I really appreciate it. Thanks for doing this.
Yes, sir, Caleb. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Have a good one, Jarreau. That is Caleb Jarreau. We couldn't have him, unfortunately, for the whole show today. He has got to run and take care of a few other things. He does a lot of great work for us. We're going to take an early break, and then we're going to get back and talk a little bit about Tennessee football versus Georgia. Beforehand, portions of the program brought to you by Zen Sports. Zen Sports is the new sportsbook in Tennessee, revolutionizing the way you earn sports betting rewards. That means no more deposit bonuses that turn into deposit nightmares. On Zen Sports, what you see is what you get. And with their cash rewards program, you get a lot of cash. For a welcome bonus, earn an unlimited 5% cash back on your betting volume for your first 15 days when you sign up with the code HOOKED. That's HOOKED, HOOKED. That's right, unlimited 5% cash back. Keep betting and keep earning with up to 3% cash back on your betting volume every month after that. And refer friends to earn a percentage of their betting volume as cash rewards too. Zen Sports is bringing the cash back to Tennessee. So if you bet big on sports, you want to be betting on Zen Sports. Zen Sports betting just got better. In 2 minutes, we're going to talk about Tennessee football. We're going to talk about comparing them to Georgia and the explosiveness of the offenses. And we got a little basketball news too. Some hoops news came out yesterday. First, 2 minutes.
Estamos in Craving Wings South North Shore location, where we've heard people say that you can get the best wings in East Tennessee. Pero ¿quién es este? El número 87, Jacob Warren.
I'll just do 6 in my sauce 87, please.
Imposible, señorita. Dale 6 más. Look at these wings. Perfectas, deliciosas, fantásticas.
Man, I don't know what you're saying, but it sounds awesome. How do you say fresh, never frozen in Spanish?
Frescas, nunca congeladas. Make your way to Craving Wings and get you 6 más.
But what was funny about Cadis, we were a full continuum of care at that time. We had detox, we had inpatient, we had outpatient. So we were doing a lot of the things that we do now. But now we just do them so much better. It's really a simple program, but we're complicated people. I am what I am, and now I got to do something about it.
You can take your life back. Call Cadis today.
Got cataracts? We can fix that. Never miss another moment. With a little help from Doctors Campbell, Cunningham, Taylor, and Hahn at cctis.com.
Do you want to own the more that owns every job? Then get to Vassey Lawn and Garden in Cleveland and get you a Toro. I'm David Vassey, here to talk to you about Toro. With a Toro Zero Turn, you'll get more out of every minute and you'll reach the finish line faster. At Vassey's, we like to say, no matter if you're mowing 3 acres a week or 11 lawns a day, homeowners and business owners alike find confidence in equipment they can trust from top to bottom.
Vassey Lawn and Garden, Highway 60 North in Cleveland.
Man alive, it's worth the drive.
Our family has been creating jewelry since 1986, each piece unique with a story all its own. I'm Rick Terry with Rick Terry Jewelry Designs. I'm a jeweler, and I want to be your jeweler. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler. My family and staff look forward to serving you. So please come see us. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut and downtown on Gay Street, right next to the Tennessee Theater.
Welcome back to Off the Hook Sports. Caleb Calhoun flying solo for the rest of the show. Please hit that like and subscribe button. D is calling you wild on the message boards. Only 2 likes. Travis says one of them is his. More guys, we are really growing something here. I know Dave's off this week. It's the doldrums of summer, but it's an exciting time with what we're doing. I don't have Cooper Mays or Jacob Warren to tell you to hit like and subscribe. I don't have the sound effects that Dave has, but I could use the like and subscribes. We could use them together. Again, we're building something very, very, very exciting here. So yesterday, news came out of the SEC basketball schedule for the 2023-2024 season. The way the SEC schedule works is you play, and we don't know how this is going to work when Texas and Oklahoma are added, but you play 18 conference games. You play all 13 teams once. You have, that would be 3 opponents that you play twice on a rotate every year, which gets you to 16 games. And I believe Tennessee's are South Carolina, Kentucky, and Vanderbilt. Those are the annual ones. And then you have, on a rotating basis, 2 other teams you do a home and home with. Not going to lie to you guys, Tennessee got a brutal draw with the SEC basketball schedule this year. Their other 2 home and homes are Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. Texas A&M and Alabama. Alabama, whatever you think of them as a program, is still rolling under NATO's. Brandon Miller may be gone. They're going to be back. They're going to be fine next year. Texas A&M is a program on the rise under Buzz Williams, just the NCAA tournament. Both teams are preseason top 25 teams this early out next year. So Tennessee, and we know what Kentucky can do. We know how dangerous Kentucky is. So Tennessee, 3 of their 5 home and homes next year are going to be preseason top 25 teams. Their schedule's already pretty loaded for non-conference play, which Rick Barnes always does. And I'm just going to pull up the way too early top 25 for you right now because ESPN tracks these weekly. This is probably the best source you can get. To their credit, Tennessee is at number 6. So Tennessee is actually higher ranked than any of these teams we're talking about right now. But other SEC teams are Arkansas at number 14, Alabama at number 18, Texas A&M at number 19. So those are the most notable teams right now. Now, really standing out is the fact that Kentucky is not in the top 25 in this way too early top 25, but Kentucky is Kentucky. You still have to believe they're going to be a big threat. And Kentucky, Florida, and Auburn are all next in line. Now, the break for Tennessee is that the SEC does seem like it's going to be a little bit less loaded this year than it was last year. So I don't think Tennessee is going to complain about this too much. However, it's still not desirable. A couple other breaks they get from the schedule. So their home games include Alabama, which you have to play twice, Auburn, Florida, Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Vanderbilt. Now pay attention to two teams I named in that list right there, which would be Auburn and Florida. Those are two of the tough teams in the SEC this year. Neither is in the way too early top 25, but they're fringe. They are, if you go to the site, they are just missing it, and they're next in line. So Tennessee getting both of them at home is a pretty good draw. That's something you want if you're Tennessee. However, on the other end, they've got to visit Arkansas, which is the other top 25 SEC team in the way too early rankings. So that's something you don't really want to deal with if you're Tennessee basketball. However, go to the message boards. Travis, you're right. In order to be the man, you got to beat the man. Bring him on. And quite honestly, I've always been a proponent. I'm not this way in football. I don't think this way in football. But in college basketball, the harder the schedule, the better. You want the hardest, toughest schedule possible. Now, this wasn't the case this was more the case back in the day with the RPI, which 75% of the RPI, if you guys don't remember, was schedule strength. It was actually ridiculous. The BPI is a little more fair. They just rank quality wins, road versus home. You actually have to beat some teams and not just play them. But the more you play, the more likely you are to beat some teams. And so college basketball rewards schedule strength more than any other sport, as it should. So when the NCAA tournament comes around, it gives you the strongest case for a solid seed, and it also prepares you relatively well. And Rick Barnes has done a great job preparing for Tennessee basketball. He always does when it comes to non-conference play, and now Tennessee has a pretty rough draw of conference play relative to the SEC. As we're talking about having some issues this year, it's not going to be, at least based on preseason rankings, it's not going to be as deep. Other teams Tennessee plays, they've got non-conference play against NC State for the Hall of Fame game in San Antonio on Saturday, December the 16th. They host Illinois on Saturday, December the 9th. And they have a visit to Wisconsin on Friday, November the 10th, which I believe is going to be their opener. Now, that's going to be an intriguing game. Plus, they've got the Maui Invitational on November 20th, 21st, and 22nd. That's a Monday through Wednesday. So Tennessee's going to have their fair share of tough college basketball games. But I will say this is a bit of a rough draw based on the two teams that they got, which is, again, Texas A&M and Alabama. Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt get every year. You might actually get a break this year with Kentucky, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt, because I would say that Kentucky, again, a lot of people are questioning if they are a top 25 caliber team. This may be one of those random rebuilding years by Calipari. We don't know yet, but typically that's like being stuck with Alabama when you're stuck with them. So you never know. Now, South Carolina, on the other hand, they went 11-21 last year under Lamont Paris, but that was his first year. He did take Chattanooga to the NCAA tournament in 2021-22. Based on what he did at Chattanooga, if that were to translate to South Carolina, though, he had 2 losing seasons at Chattanooga before he really took things off. So it's probably still another rebuilding year for South Carolina. As far as the other team that they play twice, it's Vanderbilt's Jerry Stackhouse. And we know Vanderbilt under Jerry Stackhouse is hot and cold. I mean, particularly last year, Stackhouse was left for dead, and Vanderbilt finished very, very, very strong. It was their second straight year in the NIT quarterfinals. They could turn a corner this year, but at some point they have to stop stumbling out of the gate early in the season. Stackhouse, what's happening with him reminds me of Quanzo Martin at Tennessee back there in the day when Tennessee would always finish strong, if you guys remember the Quanzo Martin years, but they would start off really, really, really slow. So they were playing catch-up to get to the NCAA tournament which is why they missed it the first 2 years. They missed it in 2011, 2012, despite finishing second in the SEC. Then they missed it again in 2012 to 13. Finally got in just barely in 2013, 2014, but they always finished strong, so they got to the Sweet 16. So for Tennessee Vanderbilt, it depends on the dates on when they're going to play Vanderbilt. Because if what Jerry Stackhouse has done is any indication, it seems like Vanderbilt's going to be a team that starts slow and starts to finish strong towards the end. Although that was just last year, to be fair. That didn't happen in 2021, 2022. What happened in 2021, 2022 was they actually just they were slogging out the whole regular season and then just turned it on in tournament play in the SEC tournament and then in the NIT. But we don't know for sure if that's going to happen this year with Vanderbilt and Jerry Stackhouse. So again, the real story is Texas A&M and Alabama. Those were two brutal draws for your two road games. For your two home and homes. And then the only way it could have been tougher is it was made tougher because the other team that is going to be one of the toughest teams in the SEC, not named Tennessee, is Arkansas, and Tennessee has to play Arkansas on the road. So in terms of the randomness, Tennessee gets a brutal draw. I don't think Kentucky's going to stay out of the top 25, though. So quite honestly, that also is a brutal draw. Travis says this year Tennessee will be terrific going into the tournament. I agree. I think Tennessee should be in great shape. Now, the question is if Rick Barnes can actually not lose to a lower seed for once in the tournament. Rick Barnes has lost to a lower seed every single year at Tennessee in the NCAA tournament. And there is that issue that he grinds people. I think personally Rick Barnes is changing his approach a bit. I'm seeing that with what he's doing with the transfer portal, willingness to spread the floor more, to shoot more. And I think Tennessee fans should be excited about that. Mr. Jones says hopefully Ziegler is back to form when he comes back. Zakai Ziegler. Well, Mr. Jones, I will say this. He's going to get tested pretty quickly because Tennessee's got a brutal schedule starting out, as I just mentioned. But perhaps that's what they need. That's what he needs to get into a rhythm to kind of get used to playing the competition he's going to have to face. So I think largely Zakai Ziegler and Tennessee will be fine. I think there will be more growing pains with this Rick Barnes team than there will in the past. It's huge that Josiah Jordan-James, Santiago Vescovi, and Ziegler are all back. Honestly, you're not that upset that your bigs are gone, with the exception of Jonas Adu. Uras Plavcic was oftentimes a liability. A lot of the reason when he was successful was because he's let him be successful because they didn't think he was good enough to draw people away from the perimeter. Olivier Kamwa did have that great game when Duke jumped to a zone in the NCAA tournament and started hitting every shot from the free throw line. But just the style of play that takes you far in the tournament now, given how Tennessee's constructed, Kamwa is not going to fit, particularly with Jonas Adu developing. Chris Ledlam coming in also kind of wasn't going to make room for that. So I think the big thing is Tennessee's going more for scores now on the perimeter. They added Jordan Gainey, Dalton Connect, two sharpshooters from USC Upstate in Northern Colorado. Freddie DeLeon, watch out. That's the big one. Freddie DeLeon the fifth. I think he could be a superstar in the making. There's still DJ Jefferson, Jemai Mashak as a defensive specialist, and Jonas Adu and Toby Awaka. That's enough for your post game. Plus, Josiah Jordan-James can move to the post, and there's JP Estrella and Kate Phillips. So I think as far as basketball goes, Tennessee is constructed pretty well. Again, the schedule is the big question. We know they got two brutal draws with Texas A&M and with Alabama. And we also know Arkansas on the road makes it even tougher. Things overall, though, again, the SEC being down can help them. But at the same time, maybe that's why you want the brutal draw if you're Tennessee. The SEC being down, you probably need to play tougher teams to help you up your schedule. That's something that Bruce Pearl did when he first took over at Tennessee in 2005. For those who don't remember, the SEC was really down during that time. It was forgotten about because in 2006, Florida won the national title and LSU reached the Final Four. But during the regular season of that year, people found the SEC to be very mediocre. But Pearl had scheduled Memphis, he had scheduled Oklahoma State, he had scheduled Texas with Rick Barnes, ironically. So it really helped Tennessee, and they got the number 2 seed in the NCAA tournament that year. That's probably going to be the situation Rick Barnes and company are in this year but it's going to be better because they actually do get to go to a tournament going to Maui, and they get Wisconsin and they get NC State. So they get enough teams that's going to beef up their resume. The SEC is very much in flux. You know, it's funny. Back in 2016, 2017, I kind of thought the SEC was a mark of stability with very solid coaches at every program. And, I mean, that was when you had Ben Howland at Mississippi State, Quanzo Martin at Missouri, obviously Calipari at Kentucky. You had solid coaches exception of Calipari, that weren't superstar coaches, Frank Martin in South Carolina, but that could get the job done. I think with this new NIL age and with this new amount of money that's coming in, though, I think that many SEC programs are shooting a lot higher than just having a solid basketball program. And you're seeing that a lot more. And I think a lot of them just decided that maybe 2 years ago. And that's probably has a lot to do with why the league will be in flux this year, because there's still a lot of rebuilding going on. So that's intriguing to pay attention to when it comes to the SEC. Mr. Jones, you asked who replaced Julian Phillips and Olivier Nkamhoua. Nobody. They're going to change their offense. Jonas Aidoo is going to be really the only true post player. If you look at the starting lineup, my prediction is that Jonas Aidoo plays in the post. And then he runs 4 perimeter guys: Zakai Ziegler, Josiah Jordan-James, Santiago Vescovi, and I'm going to say Freddie DeLeon. Now, of those 4, James would be if you need a second guy in the post, James can switch down. But that's what I think they're going to do more than anything else. I think Rick Barnes is going to play a little bit of small ball. Before we move on, portions of the program brought to you by crafttreats.com. I'm sorry, brought to you by Craft Treats. Crafttreats.com is your home for the best pet treats in the world. They even have CBD-infused treats that can minimize your pet's digestive, arthritic, or anxiety issues. Use the promo code Off the Hook. Crafttreats.com. My dog, he's not at the age yet where he has digestive arthritic issues, but he does have anxiety issues a lot. Craft Treats can help chill your dog out. If your dog's nervous about a lot of things. For instance, my wife, when she's alone with my dog, my wife is very annoyed. She watches all the Dateline stuff. And so then she's got a dog who's got anxiety. It's not good for them together. They need Craft Treats for him. So at least one of them can be calm because they just feed off each other's anxiety. So crafttreats.com for the best pet treats in the world. So moving on, let's compare Tennessee football and Georgia a little bit, because there are a couple of intriguing stories that I want to get to that kind of tie together. The first one is that Brad Crawford of 247, our man Brad Crawford, we criticized him yesterday. I don't know if we're going to criticize him today, but he had an interesting take when he ranked the most explosive offenses in the SEC, the top 7. Tennessee came in at number 2, and he said the projected offensive strength would be explosive plays, named Dante Thornton and Joe Milton as the guys coming in, and he also mentioned Jalen Bright and Jabari Small and the need for them to produce to make the offense go. However, intriguingly enough, he named the Georgia Bulldogs the number 1 explosive offense in the SEC. Yeah, you heard that right. The number 1 explosive offense, not the best offense, the explosive offense. This was shocking to me. This was absolutely shocking to me. Because if you want to say Georgia's offense is better and more efficient than Tennessee's, I can get with that. We saw that last year when Tennessee and Georgia played. They moved the ball so well. Georgia loses a lot of talent from that offense. But I can understand if that's how you feel. But to say they're more explosive than Tennessee, I think is a little weird. He says that just strength is their offensive line. What's throwing me off about this is, okay, if their strength is their offensive line, they're not going to be explosive. They're going to run the ball. Now, to Crawford's credit, he mentions Carson Beck at quarterback and 2 wide receivers, Dominic Lovett and Robert Thomas, to suggest that Georgia's going to be a little bit more explosive this year than in the past, particularly with Brock Bowers as the headline grabber at tight end. And the offensive line should allow for them to be explosive. I have to be honest, I think one thing could hold back their explosiveness, and that is Mike Bobo. Travis, as you just mentioned on the message board, and I was getting there. Yes, Mike Bobo is the most overrated coach, the most overrated coordinator in college football. I won't say overrated coach. I think Steve Sarkisian might be the most overrated coach, but that's a story for another day. Mike Bobo, I don't understand how he keeps getting jobs. He was under Mark Richt, and then that was Mark Richt's offense, and he's getting credit for Mark Richt's offense, and we're forgetting Mark Richt got fired. Mike Bobo goes to Colorado State. It doesn't work out. Colorado State never had a top 25 offense in 4 years. And here's my rule if you're an offensive coach. If you're a good offensive coach, then when you're at a non-Power 5 school, you should always have a top 25 offense. Always. I'm not saying in your first year. I'm not saying when you're building the program. But when you're at your best, when the program's where you want it to be, your offense should be in the top 25. Mike Bobo's offense never was. That is a giant red flag. I think he's going to make them even less explosive than Todd Monken did, because Todd Monken was great with analytics and smart with how he went about things. But Todd Monken could have been explosive if he needed to be. Kirby Smart didn't want it. So I don't agree with the idea that Georgia's offense is more explosive than Tennessee's. Again, maybe better, not more explosive. Heck, I would put money on LSU's offense being more explosive than Tennessee's, Ole Miss's offense being more explosive than Tennessee's, Arkansas's offense being more explosive than Tennessee's, and maybe even South Carolina's. I'm not saying any of them will be, but they're more likely than Georgia, because Georgia's offense won't be explosive this year, even if it's the best. I don't think either is true, though. And I'm sorry, Tennessee's offense is going to be the most explosive in the SEC. But with that, we've got another story that came out, and this is on Athline, and Steve Lassen had an interesting take. He ranked he looked at college football's biggest trap games for playoff contenders. Now, he didn't consider Tennessee a playoff contender. Tennessee was not in. There were 14 teams that were named playoff contenders. Tennessee, not one of them. Somehow Notre Dame was, Oregon, Clemson, Texas, Utah, Washington, Penn State, Florida State, LSU, Ohio State, USC, Alabama, Michigan, Georgia. Those are the playoff contenders. However, even though he didn't have Tennessee as a playoff contender, he said Tennessee is one of the two biggest trap games for Georgia in 2023. The other one being Auburn. Georgia has to visit Auburn September the 30th, Tennessee November the 18th. Now, I'm going to be hypocritical here, because should every trap game team be a playoff contender? No. Obviously, being a team that be a trap game versus being a playoff contender are two different things. However, if you are Tennessee and you are a trap game for Georgia, that means you can beat Georgia. If you can beat Georgia, you're a playoff contender if you're Tennessee, because if you look at the rest of Tennessee's schedule, there is absolutely nobody on the schedule that they're guaranteed to lose to. So I think what drives me crazy about this list, outside of the fact that Florida State is on it, and you guys know how I feel about Florida State, I think they're massively overrated. The same holds true for Texas. I think what annoys me the most about it, if Tennessee can beat Georgia, which you are saying that by the fact that they're a trap game, then you have to believe that they're a playoff caliber team. Because outside of maybe making the case that they can't beat Alabama, there's nobody else that they can't beat on this list. Now, I think they can beat Alabama. But if you're Steve Lassen and you think they can't beat Alabama, fine. But there's nobody else you reasonably think they can't beat on this list. There's Virginia, Austin Peay, at Florida, Texas San Antonio, South Carolina, Texas A&M, at Kentucky, UConn, at Missouri, and then Vanderbilt to close out the year. They'll be favored in all 10 of those games. And right now, they would be favored in all 10 of those games. The only ones they'd be underdogs in are Alabama and Georgia. And if you think they can beat Georgia of those two, that would theoretically be an 11-1 team that wins the East. How do you not think that they can go to the playoff? I mean, I'm sorry, that doesn't make sense to me. It's blowing my mind. And I'm sorry. I think that this makes no sense. I think if Tennessee can beat Georgia, the question of the season is if Tennessee can beat Georgia. And if they can beat Georgia, there's absolutely no reason that they can't go to the playoff. I think this is absolutely ridiculous. So Lassen says of Georgia's 12 regular season matchups, this game in Knoxville is likely to be the closest in terms of spread. Can the Volunteers' high-powered offense find a way to move the ball? Bulldogs standout defense. Okay, relative questions. Fair questions. Alabama, by the way, their two trap games are considered Tennessee's other foe on here. Their two trap games are considered Texas A&M and Auburn, both on the road. There's a lot of talk of, by that point, Auburn will be rolling under Hugh Freeze. Again, Auburn can be trap games for Alabama and Georgia, but nobody believes reasonably they're going 10-2. There's really not a path for them to go 10-2 or 11-1. And the Texas A&M game is called a trap game because they almost won last year and then beat Alabama 2 years ago. But I think the Texas A&M is going to come off the rails under Jimbo Fisher. LSU is another SEC team. They have a trap game that's considered at Ole Miss. I mean, I agree, and I actually think Ole Miss should be a trap game for Georgia if we're looking at trap games for everybody. And then Duke is considered a trap game for Notre Dame, Arizona for Oregon State, Syracuse and NC State for Clemson. Kansas considered a trap game for Texas. Texas should not be on this list. Baylor and Arizona, both on the road, are considered trap games for Utah. Michigan State and Oregon State are considered trap games for Washington. Illinois is considered a trap game for Penn State. Obviously, Michigan and Ohio State wouldn't be trap games for them. And then for Florida State at Pitt and at Florida. Now, if Tennessee were on this list, you might call Florida a trap game. I call Kentucky and Missouri trap games, but I could see Florida on this list. I think people are way too high on Florida right now because of one hot recruiting weekend that they had under Billy Napier. Jarreau and I talked about that at length yesterday. And Pitt is kind of an intriguing one given what Pat Narduzzi is running. Florida State's not going to have a trap game. 8-4, 9-3, something like that. They're going to be a massive disappointment this year. They're getting way too hyped. Ohio State's big trap game at Wisconsin. That is very intriguing. It's right after they play Penn State, and it'll be in late October, so the program might be rolling a little bit under Luke Fickell. USC's biggest trap game is at Cal. Okay, I see that. Justin Wilcox, former Tennessee defensive coordinator, everybody, has done a pretty decent job running that program. He's a great defensive coach. If Derek Dooley doesn't lose him, he may still have his job at Tennessee. And Michigan's trap game is at Maryland. But the real story, again, is Georgia and Tennessee. If Tennessee can beat Georgia, there's no way they can't be considered a playoff contender. So I think Tennessee should take it very personal that they're not considered a playoff contender on this. And they should take it very personal that they're not considered the most explosive offense in the SEC entering 2023. And Georgia shouldn't even be on this list. Explosive and good don't mean the same things. Okay, explosive are scoring off big plays. And if you're going to sell offensive line, that doesn't mean that Georgia can score on that Georgia's going to rely on a lot of big plays. I just don't buy that. I don't care about their new tight end, about their new receivers. They're going to rely on their offensive line, running the ball, and Brock Bowers. And Mike Bobo himself is an explosive offensive coordinator. So this is just kind of an annoying list altogether. I got to be honest with you guys. But the more I look at things, and the biggest story for me is for why Tennessee should have the most explosive offense in the SEC. The SEC has run off a lot of good offensive coordinators for whatever reason. South Carolina brought in Dowell Gaines this year. I don't think he's a good offensive coordinator whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I quite honestly think he's awful. I can tell you that as a Titans fan in 2012 and 2013, he was an embarrassment calling plays under Mike Munchak. It was just horrible to watch. That's a horrible hire for South Carolina. Georgia, Mike Bobo, I keep insisting, that's a terrible hire. Mike Bobo he's not a good coach. That's going to expose itself fairly shortly. Alabama, Tommy Rees, Tennessee fans should be happy about that. They should actually be a little excited about Tommy Rees at Alabama because, again, not that good of an offensive coordinator. Given those facts, and obviously Texas A&M, Bobby Petrino, that's like the worst offensive coordinator hire ever. I think Tennessee should blow Texas A&M out of the water. I'm telling you guys right now, that's not going to work. The best offensive coordinator hire on this list is Liam Cohen going back to Kentucky, quite honestly. If he were there last year, maybe Will Levis, maybe I'd be higher on him. But long story short, there's a lot of bad offensive coordinators on this list. And I would say that Tennessee has the most explosive, even though they lost Alex Cole and replaced him with Hosley. It's Josh Heupel's offense. Mr. Jones brings up Heupel's had a top 10 offense every year as a coach and a coordinator. Yep. And Travis says the Titans are a dumpster fire anyway. Yes, they are a dumpster fire, but they are a dumpster fire largely because they've had bad head coaches. They've had bad assistant coaches. One of the reasons Mike Munchak got in trouble and I think got fired was because he stayed too loyal to his assistant coaches. And so I think in general, Dowell Gaines is a Tennessee fan should be very, very, very happy about the Dowell Gaines hire. That combined with Shane Beamer, I just don't think Shane Beamer knows what he's doing. He caught lightning in a bottle towards the end of last year with a very good quarterback who could be great with the right system, and they found the right system. I don't trust Gaines to put the right system around Spencer Rattler whatsoever. So I mean, I genuinely believe that Tennessee is actually in good shape. And again, if they can somehow beat Georgia, which this site says they could, they're a playoff contender. You can't hold two thoughts in your head. You can't hold that they can beat Georgia and that they're not a playoff contender because of the rest of their schedule. So this site doesn't make that part of the story doesn't make sense whatsoever. And it also doesn't make sense to call Georgia's offense more explosive than Tennessee's offense. Portion of the program brought to you by Andy Mason Real Estate. For the best prices and service in real estate in Knoxville, there's just one place, AndyMasonRealEstate.com. Andy and his partners have been in the real estate business for a combined 40 years. They know how the market works and how to save you tens of thousands of dollars. Andy Mason, at andymasonrealestate.com. When we come back, Greg Sankey did an interview with Joel Klatt yesterday about the state of college football. Quite honestly, wasn't much to glean from what he says because he doesn't say much. But I got my thoughts on Greg Sankey and a few things he said and what really should have been asked of him, because I don't think he's getting held accountable for some of the decisions and the things that have happened with the SEC in recent weeks, months, years. We'll talk about that in a little over 2 minutes.
At sun, sand, and salt water, the beach is a very relaxing place. Unless you wear contacts. Ow! Open your eyes to the best the beach has to offer with LASIK vision correction from Campbell Cunningham Laser Center. Ah.
Hi, Mike Davis here with City Heating and Air, reminding you to always dare to compare. Our team provides quality local heating and air service, installation, and maintenance across East Tennessee. We use only the best equipment like American Standard heating and air conditioning for your residential, new construction, or commercial needs. Honesty, dependability, and customer satisfaction have been the cornerstones of our business since 1961. City Heat and Air. Dare to compare.
Our family has been creating one-of-a-kind pieces of jewelry in West Knoxville since 1986. Each piece is a combination of unique processes that bring your idea to life. Every day in our shop, a truly special item with a story all its own is being manufactured in our facility, bringing the history and family sentiment into a whole new generation of life. We're grateful that you chose us to be Knoxville's best jeweler, a title that we value and respect. Because to me, being a jeweler and owning a jewelry store are not the same thing. I'm Rick Terry. I'm a jeweler, and we want to be your jeweler. Kingston Pike and Campbell Station Road in the heart of Farragut, and downtown on Gay Street right next to the Tennessee Theater.
When you want a hard cider that's easy to enjoy, one that's crafted to perfection, you need Tennessee Cider Company. Some say it's the signature cider of the South. Others say it's the cure to your craving. They all say you'll savor every sip. With a selection of ciders free to sample, all it takes is one taste. Visit tncidercompany.com for more information, as well as to shop our ciders and merchandise online. Thirsty yet? Doors open at 10 a.m.
Welcome back to the show. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Caleb Calhoun still flinging solo for Dave Hooker this week. I'm not solo all week, don't worry, but I have to be today. Jarreau was on in the first segment. If you guys want to go back and check that out, we talked a good bit about recruiting and Chase Birds entering the transfer portal. Travis says he wasn't expecting Calhoun with the Cajun spelling to make it on the show today since LSU won the World Series. Hashtag hangover. Travis, I did not celebrate LSU winning the World Series. I am not an LSU fan. I am a fan of facts. And the facts are LSU right now is probably the biggest threat to Tennessee in terms of NIL and staying ahead of the curve on things. And their football program, again, LSU is the best job in America. So that's all that is. I'm sorry. That is the truth. Georgia and Ohio State are like 1B the best jobs in America in football if we want to go there. That doesn't make me a Georgia or Ohio State fan, but well played. Maybe I'm just a hardcore Peyton Manning fan and he's from Louisiana, which I am a Peyton Manning fan. I believe he's the best quarterback of all time. And since he's from New Orleans, does that have something to do with me being loyal to Louisiana? I don't know. I'm from Memphis, but I am a Lil Wayne fan though. Anyways, Greg Sankey was on Joel Klatt's show yesterday. It was the same type of interview that Klatt did with Nick Saban a week ago. Quite honestly, Greg Sankey reminded me a lot of Nick Saban. Very methodical, very political with his answers, boring a lot of times, but gave some intriguing answers on issues in college football. Because as we all know right now, college football is going through a massive, massive transition. And he talked about playoff expansion, the calendar, the scheduling, conference games, NIL, transfer portal. I encourage all of you to go and check out that interview with the forewarning that you're not going to get any real answers, honestly, because Greg Sankey says a lot while saying nothing. A couple of things, though, that Greg Sankey brought in that kind of stood out to me. A couple of annoying things. One was he talked about how the SEC didn't need playoff expansion. And his quote was, "The number of teams that have captured national championships out of this league is remarkable, and that's unique. That's part of what sets us apart. So we didn't have to expand." And I meant that. Even after we announced the additions of Oklahoma and Texas, I'm still comfortable staying at 4. I don't think we are going to have fewer teams in the 4 than we've had. But the feeling was that we weren't building upon the existing health of college football to the future of college football, particularly because we have an entire segment of the country not involved in the national championship, and that's the West Coast. This is a flat-out lie by Greg Sankey. Okay, I'm just going to tell you this is a flat-out lie. He's trying to pretend that the expansion didn't help the SEC, and it was more about involving other conferences. If it was about involving other conferences and other regions, one, the SEC itself wouldn't be expanding that 16 teams, and now rumors are they're trying to raid the ACC, which they are. And more importantly than that, he would have been fine with the initial proposal, which was an 8-team playoff where the 5 Power 5 champions go, the top group of 5 champion goes, and then 2 wild cards. He didn't want that either. And the reason he didn't want that, the reason he went to 12, was he wanted to maximize the number of SEC teams that could possibly get in, which is fine. That's the goal. It's about maximizing the revenue and the money. But quite honestly, just be upfront with that. He wanted more. That was one of the holdups on expanding the playoff to begin with, was Sankey wanted a 12-team playoff. I think there were a couple of other conferences and commissioners who did. I believe Notre Dame wanted a 12-team playoff because that opened more wild card spots because they can't get an automatic bid as a conference champion. But for him to say something like that, that's just quite honestly it's just annoying that he would say something like that because it's just not true based on what he was trying to do. He wanted to expand and he just wanted to make sure they expanded to 12, not 8. Now, another interesting thing Sankey said was about future SEC schedules. Now, this is a big one. As we know, Sankey wanted 9 games for an SEC schedule starting next year with 16 teams and no divisions. The schools couldn't agree. Tennessee was one of the ones that blocked him along with Alabama, and the SEC is now stuck at 8 games next year. You can't have competitive balance in this league if you have an 8-game schedule with 16 teams and no divisions. It just can't happen. Sankey said, quote, "Our decisions about scheduling will have a lot of factors: non-conference game access, the number of conference games, how we place and how we schedule. Within the conference context, while we try to spread conference games throughout the season, we're somewhat unique in that we start week 2 with really important games. If you're going to play in week 2, that means you're going to have to fill some games out later in the season with non-conference foes." That is the most non-answer answer I've ever heard in my life. Okay, he was asked about how the SEC was going to design their future schedules. What he said doesn't mean anything. The real question was, how did he not have his troops in order in line for the SEC scheduling when the meet in Destin happened 2 weeks ago? And I have to be honest with you guys. I think Greg Sankey is losing his grip on the conference. I think that what he doesn't want to acknowledge is he tries to act like everything's under control, but it's not. They added Texas and Oklahoma, just really quick. Texas and Oklahoma asked to join the league, it looks like, and Sankey added them after having already signed that big deal with ESPN and ABC that they're locked into for 10 years, while the Big Ten has a TV deal worth twice as much that they'll get out of in 7 years. So before the SEC gets its next conference, before the SEC gets its next TV deal, the Big Ten will be on into its second deal, while its first one is already more than twice as much as the SEC's now. He got played. Greg Sankey doesn't want to admit this, but he got played. He got played by the Big Ten. He got played by the networks. He got played by ESPN. And he played himself by not being prepared for how the league was going to go about scheduling when it added Texas and Oklahoma. And a lot of these questions need to be asked of Greg Sankey, honestly. And he's saying a lot without saying much and without saying anything. And I think there's a lot of wanting to try to get interviews with him, understanding that he is right now the pantheon of college football because his decision-making, a decision he makes carries more weight than a decision anybody else in college football makes right now. But that's all the more reason to ask him how he could get played by Kevin Warren and the Big Ten, how he could get played with not being prepared with Texas and Oklahoma joining the league. I mean, guys, I don't know what's going to happen beyond 2024, but if they don't hash this out quickly, there will be some Tennessee will not be playing Alabama in 2025. That rivalry's gone. Okay, because you can't stick with an 8-team schedule in the SEC. You have to go to 9. So I think Greg Sankey is getting away with a lot right now. And he said a lot while saying nothing in this interview yesterday. And I think he needs to be called out for it. I mean, he didn't even answer if all conferences should go to the same scheduling. He was asked about that. He was talking about the challenges presented by NIL. I mean, and all he said with NIL was that, kids spend a lot of money when they have it when they're 18 or 19. Okay, so how do you address it? I mean, again, he's not saying really anything. And I think the thing that's concerning if you're an SEC football fan is I don't think he's getting out ahead of this stuff either, guys. I really don't. I think Greg Sankey is Greg Sankey took over the best product in America, which is SEC football. The best product in America. It's the most valuable product, in opinion, in America. Wasn't that hard to mess up? And I don't think he messed it up. But I think the revenue and the popularity it's getting is not a testament to him. I think it's a testament to the SEC is just naturally a great product as it is. Similar to Roger Goodell in the NFL. A lot of people think Roger Goodell is a good commissioner because of the money the NFL's been bringing in over the last 10 years. I take the opposite approach. I think the NFL is just a naturally great product, and you have to work at it to mess it up. You actually have to actively do things to screw it up, and Roger Goodell hasn't actively done things to screw it up. He has made a lot of missteps that hurt some of the NFL's following at different years. I got to be honest with you. So, no, I don't think Roger Goodell is a good commissioner just because the NFL increases in revenue. It increases in revenue every year because he took over a good situation. This is like when a CEO takes over a great company that's on the rise. I think I'm just going to say it. I think the SEC, I think Greg Sankey might be the Roger Goodell of the SEC. He's taken over a product that is an amazing product that I could sell, honestly, that anybody could sell. And I'm a terrible salesperson, I'll be honest with you, but I could sell that to anybody. The SEC is a heck of a product. It's very much Larry Coker the first year at Miami when he inherited that Miami Hurricanes team and won a national title that Butch Davis had built that was the most talented team in college football history. I mean, we see that all the time in college football and college basketball where a coach takes over a program that another coach built up, and then that coach enjoys the fruits of the labor and just rides the wave of success. Some people might say Philip Fulmer did that when he was at Tennessee. And I'm going to argue that Greg Sankey is doing the same thing in the SEC right now. And yes, Roger Goodell is doing the exact same thing in the NFL. They're both riding a wave. They inherited a good product. You and I could have made that product successful. What the Big Ten did was a little bit different. The Big Ten product is not as good as the SEC's. It's not. South Carolina versus Kentucky is going to be a bigger draw every time than Illinois versus Purdue. It just is. The Big Ten is not as good of a product, yet they got a better deal on their TV deals, and they have a better scheduling method, and everybody was on board for the scheduling method, by the way, for football. So they get to protect all their rivals. So the Big Ten was put together very, very. The Big Ten has been completely organized, completely methodical. They got USC and UCLA after the SEC got Texas and Oklahoma, and they were more prepared for their scheduling. And Greg Sankey needs to be called out on these things. And he shouldn't do another interview until someone asks him about why he didn't have his ducks in a row for the scheduling and how he let the Big Ten get a deal worth twice as much as the SEC. And if the SEC will be able to renegotiate with ESPN whatsoever, because this contract was done before Texas and Oklahoma were added. And if they can't, then the SEC signed a bad deal and they got played by ESPN. And they need to be called out for that because this is a 10-year deal, guys. That means if they're stuck in this, that means for 10 years, the Big Ten will be bringing in twice as much revenue as the SEC. That's a dangerous, dangerous proposition because then that will make the Big Ten product competitive with the SEC because they will have the revenue to hire good coaches, to invest in facilities, and for NIL from boosters, honestly, because the boosters don't have to donate as much to the program. These are big issues. These are things that have to be addressed by the SEC because you can't let other conferences in this horse race pass you by, and he's letting the Big Ten pass him by. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Thank you guys all for tuning in with me today. We're doing our best with Dave off this week, but we're having a lot of fun and hope to continue it. Jarreau should be back on our show for an early segment Thursday, and then we'll have him again for the whole show on Friday. We're going to see what we can do tomorrow. We still should have Josh Ward and Fred White this week, so keep an eye out for those and how it happens. But thank you guys all for tuning in. You guys all have a great rest of your Tuesday. And again, we'll be back tomorrow at 10 o'clock, still doing the show, same time, regardless of who's on. I will be here. So thank you guys all.